our new board member. We're going to wait for everyone to come into the meeting and log in. David DeWall. David, thanks for renewing your membership just a few days ago. Mr. Mark, you as well. It was nice talking to you the other day. Ambassador Cragen, were your ears burning? We were just talking about you. Martha Henry with the City of San Antonio Global Engagement Office, and Dr. Romo. Dr. Gill, thanks for joining in. And our fearless leader, Board Chair Peggy Pace, tuning in. You guys are welcome to share your business, your organization, who you are in the chat room so others could see who else is tuning in. Ambassador Moreno is tuned in. Gavin from the Area Foundation. Sorry, I can't read everyone's, but you know who you are. And we'll start in about 1 minute. HEB in the house. Vital part of our community. And a big supporter of the council. Thank you for tuning in, Christina. We got representation from the World Affairs Council Young Professionals, Bianca. Says that only other panelists can see the chat. Can you open a connection to all attendees? I don't know what that means, Martha. Can you direct message Samantha? I don't know if we could actually do that. But if anyone could do it, Samantha could do it. John, Association of Former Intelligence Officers. I'd love to connect with you, John. If you could share your email or private message me, would love to chat with you offline. All right. Is everyone ready?
Yes.
We're glad that you all are tuning in. Welcome to the World Affairs Council special program on Venezuela. We've got some great guests from not only here in San Antonio, but also on the East Coast in Atlanta, Georgia. And looking forward to this really important and lively discussion. Of course, we appreciate everyone who has tuned in, who supports the World Affairs Council. We can't do this without your support. Any donations, any gift, whether it's your time or whether it's your gift of treasure, you could click on the links in the chat line to become a member or make a donation. So we appreciate it. I want to thank Paula Martinez, who you will hear from shortly, who represents the San Antonio community of Venezuelans. Big thanks to Eduardo, who I'll introduce you in a second, Eduardo Para, and also Ambassador Shapiro, who is my colleague from the World Affairs Council of Atlanta as their president and CEO, and also former ambassador. And none of this would have happened without the direction and support of Ambassador Luis Moreno, who is watching. So thank you for suggesting this great idea, Ambassador Shapiro, who is also on our board of directors. If you tune in late, please let us know who you are in the chat room. Share your website, share your business, your organization, and also stay tuned. We are looking at having meetings in person, doing a hybrid. We did a test run last week, and I think it went well. So thank you for, or stay tuned rather, to hear about when we go in person. So let us know who you are. All right. I've known this young man for some time now. He is a great contributor to our local community. Eduardo Para, he's a civil engineer. He's got 20 years of experience in the field. He's a CEO and co-founder of Para & Company, LLC. It's a women-owned emerging small business in San Antonio. He also serves as the principal engineer of the firm. He serves as the trustee of SAWS, San Antonio Water System. He's been a board member, or he's a board member of the Opera, and also an advisor to the board of the Breckenridge Park Conservancy. He's also a fellow of the German Marshall Fund, LSA grad, and also a former board member of the World Affairs Council, and also 40 under 40. Was that recent, Eduardo? Don't answer that. He's completed his master's from Penn State and also did his undergraduate degree in Venezuela. I want to introduce you to my good friend, Eduardo Plata. Take it away, Eduardo.
Armin, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure being here. The World Affairs Council is very close and dear to me. And we're here to, the mission of the World Affairs Council is to bring the world to San Antonio and San Antonio to the world. And we're all curious of what's happening out there. And in this program, we intend to create some dialogue on what's happening in Venezuela and what the future might bring. More important, understand how is that affecting Venezuelans, both there and locally. So for that, I have two special guests, and I'm going to start with the ladies. So I'm going to start with Paola Martinez, who is a businesswoman from here. She was born in my hometown of Maracaibo, Venezuela. She's been living in San Antonio for over 30 years, and she graduated from Incarnate World with a bachelor's in finances. And she's been serving as the president of the Venezuelan Association in San Antonio since 2018. She owns a local business here, is the Castle Hills Flowers, and she does weddings and event planners. Also with us, and I'm gonna give them a few minutes to give some opening remarks, but also with us we have Ambassador Shapiro, which we all want to hear from. Ambassador served as ambassador of US in Venezuela, and he knows by firsthand everything that happened there, and all the parties involved. So he also understands what the government can and cannot do of the United States as a friend, as being looking outside in. So we're looking forward to hearing from him. He's a graduate of Georgia State University and as a master's, and he got his Bachelor in Arts from UPenn. He's currently the president of the World Affairs Council in Atlanta. So with that, Ambassador, would you like to give a few opening remarks?
Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. I appreciate it. And Paola, I'm honored to be here on the panel with you. I know how hard it is doing what you're doing with new refugees arriving every day from a country that is so much in need. I also want to give a big shout out to Luis Moreno, who's an old friend of mine. We worked together. I was trying to remember the years. And I think it was in the late 1980s when we both were young guys. And so it's an honor to be here with Luis Moreno. I am, just like everybody who's ever touched Venezuela, I am obsessed with it. You know, it's not a post that you go and you spend a couple of years and you go on somewhere else. And so it's something that I have tried to stay in touch and on top of, in touch with ever since I left Venezuela. And I have to want to tell everybody here, I left in late 2004. So that has been almost 17 years, 16 and a half years. It's been a long time. And what a couple things, I mean, there's two ways of talking about Venezuela. One is for Venezuelans, and another is for Anglos, for Americans who are trying to figure out what in the world is going on in this country. And I want to just say Venezuela is a human tragedy. What has happened in Venezuela wasn't caused by a war, wasn't caused by an earthquake or a natural disaster. It was caused by human folly. And that folly has left a country which has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, which at one point was the wealthiest country in the Western Hemisphere, in Latin America, and which accepted refugees from Colombia, from Chile, from all over Latin America. Now, I saw the other day that per capita income in Venezuela is lower than per capita income in Haiti. Inflation rate right now is somewhere around 3,000%. I mean, we just, how do you even measure that? I mean, I take my hat off to whatever economists can try to figure that out. It was up over 1,000,000%. Venezuela, when I arrived in 2002, was producing 3.2 million barrels a day of oil. According to the OPEC figures last month in April, Venezuela produced 445,000 barrels of oil a day. That's less than Venezuela produced in 1937.
Yeah.
1937. I mean, that's just extraordinary. And since the oil is Venezuela's, for statistically significant purposes, oil is Venezuela's only export, besides refugees, the country is just worse and worse and worse off. And so there's 32 million Venezuelans, somewhere between 30 and 32 million Venezuelans, depending on which figures you listen to, that 5 to 6 million Venezuelans have fled the country and are living abroad. If they've got money, they're living in Spain and US and France and other places. If they've got no money, they've walked across South America to Peru, to Argentina, Brazil, and of course in Colombia, which is returned the favor by welcoming Venezuelans and giving them access to the health system and the schools and the right to work. Although there's increasing problems with that, as you've got unrest in Colombia right now. I'm going to stop there. I mean, that's the tragedy of Venezuela. That's the human tragedy of Venezuela. Before we went on live, I was telling, there are estimated to be 20,000 Venezuelans in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're not close to the border. We're not close to Miami, but 20,000 Venezuelans here in Atlanta. In many ways, the tragedy of Venezuela has been a bonus for the rest of the world, as people like Eduardo and Paola and you name it are working and taking jobs and opening businesses and doing all those sorts of things that benefit the recipient countries, but gives no benefit to Venezuela at all. And of course, Venezuelans abroad are, every single person I know is sending money to Venezuela, sending packages to Venezuela, trying to figure out how to get medicine into Venezuela for relatives. Because the second part of that tragedy, the flip side of it, is grandparents didn't leave, right? By and large, the young people and middle-aged people have left, but the grandparents are still there. People who've retired are still there, and their income is worth less and less and less. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ambassador. We used to export coffee as well, and it was really good. Paola, you have the tall task of driving the Venezuelan Association here in San Antonio, and you know firsthand what these families that are arriving here feel. And as the ambassador mentioned, some of them were able to arrive very well. Some other ones have a little bit more need. Can you tell us a little bit about the Venezuelan Association and the families that you're welcoming right now?
Sure. The Venezuelan Association is a non-profit organization. It was founded July 21st in 2015. And our mission is to incorporate the community, the Venezuelan community, to the San Antonio community. As 2018 was our last census done, and at that time we have around 1,300 families in San Antonio. We think about this point by 2020 we have around 2,000 families now in the city. What they're actually the people who's coming to San Antonio, most of them are prepared. They have careers, degrees, and you have both sides. The one that's not educated, but mostly is an educated community that is arriving to San Antonio. We trying, like I said, our mission is trying to help them to incorporate to the city, offering seminars about how to get a house, taxes, guide them with questions about doctors, where we can find aid by the government. So that has been the main work that we've done. And that we have lately as a lot of families coming in without anything. So we try to help them to start it over a little bit. So.
Thank you, Paola. That's such a great noble cause that you're decided to undertake, and we know this is in a voluntary basis. So, really appreciate that. I thought, for the benefit of the audience, just going real quick through some of how we got here. If you recall, as the ambassador said, Venezuela was one of the wealthiest countries in South America. In the one thing that also the ambassador remarked was that we've always been mainly dependent of oil. So what happens is, if you're heavily dependent of oil, every time that there is an oil price crash, that affects tremendously everything in the government. And as we go through the history, we're going to notice that has been the catalyzer of everything that has happened. So in 1985, we have an oil price crash that brings a lot of unrest in Venezuela. And in 1998, there is the Caracazo riots. During Carlos Andres Perez government, there were many riots. There were martial law to be able to control the population. And there was a coup attempt in 1992. And there were two coup attempts. And one of them was given by Hugo Chavez, and he was not successful. And basically, he went to jail. President Perez got impeached in 1993, and his successor pardons Chavez in 1994. Now, Chavez, during that year, he goes and meets Fidel Castro, and he starts getting ideas of what he can do. In 1998, there's again an oil price crash, and this time there are elections, and Chavez gets elected. So from there, price went up again, and that helped a lot cover some of the things that Chavez did at the beginning with expropriations and with starting to create the regimen he now has. If you recall, Chavez went on and he changed the constitution so presidents had unlimited terms. So, and he also extended the term, so we didn't have that many elections. He He did some oil trades. He basically gifted oil to Cuba and other places that were supporting his government. And the country was getting impoverished and in debt. There were many devaluations of money. And at some point around 2012, Chavez gets ill and he dies, and Maduro is able to win election because he was the vice president. He continues, he wins his first election, Maduro there. Venezuela defaults in debt in 2017. And 2018, there is a migration crisis, as the ambassador said, about 5 million people left. And in 2019, we found ourselves with two presidents. We have, there is an election that is not recognized by most of the world. I think there were about 60 countries that didn't recognize the election and indicated Juan Guaido, which was the president of what would be the equivalent of Congress, the national election there. And so we have Guaido, that everybody in the opposition follows, or most people in the opposition follows. And then we have Maduro. And right now, where we are is that the opposition basically is saying, listen, until we can have free elections, until we can have impartial elections, there's no point to continue having these. And a great part of the opposition are encouraging these sanctions from the EU and the United States as a way to pressure the government and as a way to bring dialogue into the government. Recently, as of 5 days ago, last week, Maduro says he's willing to get in conversation with the opposition, having there also representatives of the European Union and Norway. So I don't know what's going to happen from there, but I'm going to stop here, and I'm curious to hear your thinking, Ambassador.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like everything. The closer you get to it and the greater granularity you have, the more complicated the situation is. I mean, a couple of things that I would add in there to make your story a little bit richer is that when Chavez was elected in 98, takes office in 99, the price for Venezuelan oil is $8 a barrel. $8 a barrel. When he dies in 2012, the price for Venezuelan oil is around $115 a barrel. I mean, so that's like, imagine you're the CEO of Ford Motor Company and your shares increase that much in value. I mean, he's seen as this genius by a number of people. And you have foreign corporations and countries, falling all over themselves to deal with Chavez because he's got the oil and they need the oil. Oil, by the way, goes up even more after his death and then crashes. And so poor Maduro is stuck with oil dropping and with an inability to cover their, when I say poor Maduro, I'm being sarcastic, and with oil dropping and going down below $40 a barrel at some point. It's back up again right now temporarily. So you've got that going on. The other thing that has helped Chavismo, both Chavez and Maduro, is that the opposition is internally split. I mean, it would be as if you were trying to get the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the United States to collaborate with each other against a dictatorial president. I mean, so they've all have grievances against each other going back to elections from decades ago. They're angry with each other, this thing that your uncle did to my father sort of thing. Their ideology is diverse. The only thing that unites them is opposition to Chavismo. And overlying all of that, Armin, is that Chavez and now Maduro are not honest negotiators. I mean, so the opposition is absolutely correct not to believe a word that these guys say, right? So we're going to run free and fair elections. Well, how many times have you said that in the past, right? We're going to negotiate with you. Well, if you want to negotiate, let political prisoners, release the political prisoners that your government is holding. Allow a free press to operate, right? Have not just free and fair, have observers come in who can run the election for you. That's the sort of thing that they need to do. I mean, look, we've just had experience in our country with one side that doesn't, which said that the last election was stolen. And there are people in this country who believe that. In Venezuela, election after election was stolen. I mean, it's not like there's conjecture about it. Elections were stolen, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows that the our elections are run at the state and county level. Elections in Venezuela are run at the federal level by the National Electoral Council, the CNEA. And it is an organization which every decision it has ever made, certainly since I first got involved with Venezuela in 2002, has been in favor of Chavismo. Every single decision they've made. So to ask people to believe that the CNE is going to be able to run an election that people will have confidence in is requires a suspension of your common sense and your knowledge of the past history of Venezuela. So how do you get out of this mess? That's the challenge. That's the challenge the Biden administration is dealing with. Ambassador Brian Nichols, who's been nominated to be Assistant Secretary for the Western Hemisphere, testified yesterday before the United States Senate, said that the sanctions, the economic sanctions on Venezuela must be continued. The problem, of course, with economic sanctions is, while they hurt the government, they hurt ordinary people more. I mean, they crash the economy, they hurt the economy. Thank goodness, I mean, UNICEF and World Food Program have reached agreement so that a certain amount of food and medicine is getting into the country. But obviously, it's an insufficient amount, and you want to make sure that food and medicine going into the country is distributed fairly and not just only to supporters of the government, right? How you get out of here? I mean, I'd love to find out what Ambassador Nichols' plans are, how the National Security Council, because this is a really difficult issue. We have similar issues in Nicaragua. We've had this issue in Cuba since 1959, no? So
and he's still there.
And they're still there.
Thank you, Ambassador. You bring up many good points, and I guess that's something that we'll continue discussing. I want to switch to Paola for a sec and talk about migrants, Venezuelan migrants. You know, I had the opportunity to be in Berlin during the Syrian crisis and talk to many of the Syrian refugees. And I guess one doesn't compute sometimes when they tell you, well, there are refugees walking to your country or arriving into your country. You don't understand what really a refugee is. And I had a meeting. I was scheduled to meet with a German official that was helping these migrant from Syria, and I'm running behind to my meeting, and I get there, and I see two people, and one of the people have their hair wrapped and is dressing very loosely, and the other person has a nice beard, has a suit and a tie, And I immediately thought that the person with half their hair, was in the Syrian refugee. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, what that person had to go through. I'm just wondering what happened in the journey. And I get there to talk, and I discovered that the person with the wrap hair was the German official that he just likes to fashion his hair like that way. And the well-dressed gentleman was a Syrian refugee, would happen to be a doctor with a PhD in something very complicated, and we had a very pleasant conversation. And I realized at that point that migrants, many of them are very highly qualified. However, they cannot always exercise. What are you finding, Paola? What type of, in all the families, I think, I don't know how many families we have. If you can tell us a little bit about that, and what are you seeing in the professional background of these immigrants?
My goodness, it's amazing. They are doctors, lawyers, engineers, economists, accountants. I mean, you have an incredible range. I think we have the most amazing migration of professionals of any country in the world. I mean, and here, some of them are creating their own businesses. They're helping the others, but they do want to try to find out a way that they can complete their studies, or how to get transcripts on their credits on the school to continue here to try to incorporate it to the American community. Many of them, like I say, they have helped the others, by opening businesses, but that they all had the same questions. How long this is going to take? How can help us? And that we try as much as we can to guide them through the San Antonio community and programs, how to reach this goal that they are pursuing.
It's interesting that you've said it. I believe in migrants. I'm a migrant myself. And I came here, and this great country opened the doors for me. And I remember I came here to study in 1998, got my graduate degree, and went back to Venezuela, and which was always my plan. And I was there from 2002 to 2005, and the country was falling apart. And because of that, I seek a job here in the United States. I was able to get a work visa, and that work visa eventually turned into a green card after 10 or 12 years working for that firm. And I guess half my life I spent in Venezuela. A little over half my life I've spent here in the United States, and I can see the side from both ends, and this is truly the country of opportunity. How do we help this population integrate? Because an immigrant can be very successful as long as he has integration opportunities. Otherwise, it can be really bad for both the immigrant and the welcoming state, and that's something that we'd like to prevent. But I'm gonna go back to the situation in Venezuela, and I'd like to, and we're close to, we have about 10 minutes before we get into the questions. But Ambassador, if you could talk a little bit more about the restrictions, the sanctions, right? Because there's also, we were talking a few days, you and I ago, about North Korea and other places where sanctions have been imposed, and you also mentioned the case of Africa, and I'm genuinely curious, because what we're hearing, I was able to to get information from some of the political parties in Venezuela before doing this event, this live webinar. And the opposition truly wants sanctions to continue. They see it as the only way to bring the government back to the table. I understand that it's an edge of two. It's a sword of two edges. Would you like to comment more, perhaps in some of the cases where it's been successful, some of the cases where it hasn't worked, and what can we expect?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to keep in mind is that economic sanctions are slow. And require enormous patience, because the idea that you'll put sanctions in place and the government's going to fall as a result of those sanctions, I mean, it's not worked in Iran. It's not worked in North Korea. I think we have the tightest sanctions on North Korea of any country in the world. It's certainly not worked in Cuba. We've put sanctions on from time to time on Serbia, and you name it, depending on what's going on. The example where sanctions have worked is against the apartheid regime in South Africa. But even there, I mean, it took years for those sanctions to, were part of the government being squeezed from all sides, and for that government to finally let Mandela out of prison and hold elections, right? I mean, so it's not an easy thing to do. And while if people have a bank account abroad, people have dollars in their bank account in Venezuela, can do okay despite the sanctions. But who it really hurts is people who have no access to dollars or euros or you name it, as their standard of living falls. And that's what just breaks your heart to see, because it takes so long. One of the things I was talking about earlier is that if you're the president of a country, if you're in the cabinet of a dictatorial regime, your country can be so impoverished, and you as the president, you as the minister of this or the general of that, you're going to live really well despite all of that. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really affect them, it affects their population. And so there's this odd calculation that the population will become so dissatisfied with them, their own supporters will become dissatisfied with them and put pressure on them. They are able to resist. They're getting money from taxation. I mean, even in an impoverished country, there's still taxes coming into the national treasury, right? And there's corruption. And Venezuela was corrupt when I was there. I'm going to assume that has not improved, and probably the opposite is the case. So where you need a government permit to import something, you need an inspection on your business. You name it. You need the death certificate so you can bury your mother. All of those things are just an open door for corruption, right? And I suspect you've experienced that, Eduardo, when you were there. Am I right?
Right, and there is drugs right now coming out from Venezuela, and there are many bad things, unfortunately. I ask you, Ambassador, because I want. Is it the United States as in the role of police of the world, or some other great entity that is going to fix Venezuela, that is going to come and do an intervention that is going to invade, or is that what's going to fix Venezuela in your opinion?
Well, no and no and no. So let me be as clear as I possibly can, even though I know it's disappointing. I mean, when I was in Venezuela, if I had $1 for everybody who asked me, when are you going to send in the Marines? I'd be a rich guy today, right? Right. And certainly after our experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, the appetite for the United States to be invading foreign countries is less than it was prior to those experiences, right? I mean, so this is a difficult thing to do. And with a Democratic administration in the United States, Trump, pardon me, I'm going to get political. Trump was bluffing all along, implying to the Venezuelan American community that Trump was going to get tough, that Trump was going to do this, that Trump was going to do that. You even had John Bolton, you remember, the national security advisor, in a press conference on the back of a yellow legal pad had written how many troops for Venezuela, that this was, and that was the diplomatic term for that is bullshit. That was bullshit. And that was a hardline Republican administration, or a pretending to be hardline Republican administration. The Biden administration is not going to do that. There's not support among the American people. There's not support in the American Congress. And there's no appetite for military intervention in the U.S. military. Now, the U.S. military will follow orders, but the commanding general at Southcom, I'd be willing to bet you there's no great enthusiasm for invading Nicaragua, for invading Venezuela, for invading Cuba, right? I mean, it's not going to happen.
So I've always thought as a Venezuelan that we need to figure out how to get Chavez out of there. And there is a lot of very good people trying to do that right now, some of them in jail. And what could the U.S. do to help?
Well, first of all, the U.S. has got economic sanctions. The FBI and the U.S. intelligence agencies are busy collecting information and indicting people in Cuba, the generals, the minister of this, the former government official, who we have sufficient evidence to get an indictment from a grand jury, right? We're denying visas. I mean, COVID has kind of stopped everybody from traveling, but denying, at one point, they just killed Chavistas that they couldn't come to Florida for spring training, right? That their visas had been canceled. It just, right? That they couldn't take their children to Disneyland. We don't think of it that way, but Venezuela and the United States in the age of air travel are neighboring countries, right? Right. We're family members. We've got family on both sides. We share music and sports and food. There's a Repa chain here in Atlanta that now has 6 locations. It's becoming Atlanta's fast food. Right? Okay, all of that ties us together. A love for baseball ties us together. Venezuelans playing in the big leagues ties us together. All that's great, but that's soft power. How do you turn that into something that's going to push a government out? Right. And I've referred to Nicaragua a couple of times. Do you remember that Daniel Ortega was so sure of his own support that he held a free and fair election, which he lost in the 70s, I want to say. Maybe it was in the 80s.
Yeah, Ambassador.
And that's going to be the challenge. How do you do that? How do you why would I hold an election if I think I'm going to lose that election? If I am Maduro and the gang of people around Maduro, why would I want to hold an election if I'm going to lose that election?
That's it. That's the unfortunate reality that we're trying to overcome. I'm going to start opening questions from our audience, and feel free to write it in there. The World Affairs staff will send them to me. I see one here. That is a point that is asking what are the relationships like between Venezuela, Russia, and China? And it's interesting, Ambassador, because when Guaido was recognized as president. It was recognized as president for almost 60 governmental bodies. There were a few nations that did not recognize him, that recognized Maduro, let's call it like that recognized President Maduro as the president. And these nations were Russia, China, South Africa, Iran, Syria, Cuba, and Turkey. So I've also seen the external debt of Venezuela, grow on exponentially, and I understand that debt is being financed by Russia and China. So there is a lot of foreign interest from those countries there. I guess as a moderator, I don't supposed to be answering questions. I saw that
you're asking and answering. Look, here's the deal.
Venezuelan too.
I would encourage all of you. There's a guy named Russ Dallin, D-A-L-L-E-N. And you can follow Russ Dallin on Twitter, and you can get on his newsletter. And he follows every Venezuelan bond issue. And is there the money to pay for it, and where that money is coming from? I think Russ lives in Miami now. He's married to a Venezuelan and was living in Caracas when I was there. And he down to, every time a payment is due, where's the money going to come from? Is the payment going to be made on time? So I encourage you, if you want the real information on that, to please follow Russ Dallin. The thing you have to remember about the Russians is the Russian economy is slightly smaller than Italy and slightly larger than Spain's. Russia can send planes to Venezuela, twice a year. There'll be some bombers that land in Venezuela. Russia doesn't have the money to bail out Venezuela. It just flat out does not have the economic wherewithal that the Soviet Union had to bail out Cuba in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Russia just simply cannot afford to do that. China was lending money lending money to Cuba in return for oil shipments, right? So the money wasn't free, and it wasn't interest free. And as I understand it now, there's probably somebody in the audience who's got details that are much better than mine, is that China is reducing its loans to Venezuela and is trying to get its money out because it has no confidence in the government of Venezuela. Cuba is helping, but not with money. Cuba is helping, and Venezuela still provides oil to Cuba. At one point, it was 125,000 barrels a day. Now, the last number I saw was somewhere between 70 and 80,000 barrels a day, which Cuba doesn't pay for in money. Cuba pays by sending medical technicians, doctors, dentists, ballet instructors, basketball coaches, and intelligence agents to Cuba, right? So they are essential for keeping Maduro in power. But that's not money, and that's not going to keep the Venezuelan economy afloat. The other thing, and I apologize for going on too long, the other thing you need to keep in mind is that there's an oversupply of oil in the world right now. That things have changed completely from the way they were in 2012, 2015, when the price of oil was over $120 a barrel. Because demand, because of renewables, because of fracking, because of, there's a huge find of oil that Exxon has made in Guyana that they're going to start exploiting and exporting oil from Guyana.
Right.
Oil is coming out of Africa. So that the Venezuelan
economy is changing,
is less important as a percentage of the world supply of oil than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Okay, so Ambassador, we have about 5 minutes left.
And a ton of questions, and I apologize for long answers.
Yeah, we have a ton of questions, but I I'm going to ask you for, a couple of questions, if you can respond quickly before we go to closing remarks. But a viewer is asking, what do you think the influence of these so-called socialism of the 21st century is having, or will have in the next elections for Latin America in general? And another viewer is asking if Chavez will still be alive, will Venezuelan situation be different than with Maduro there?
Well, the second is easier than the first. I mean, Chavez was, whether you like him or not, Chavez was a charismatic figure who was able to project his personality, not just in person, but on television. And Maduro is the opposite. Nobody has ever accused Maduro of being charismatic. And so then you get all these, is it Diosdado Cabello is the power behind the throne? I mean, to me, it's a miracle that Maduro is still in power, because I never would have guessed that he could have survived as long as he could. 21st century socialism, and look, there's always been waves in Latin America and in Europe and in Asia and in Africa of countries voting to the left, voting to the right. I don't see 21st century socialism as being any different than 20th century socialism. It's socialism, and it didn't work in the Soviet Union. East Germany, the most efficient people in the world, couldn't make socialism work. And it certainly has not worked in Venezuela.
Thank you, Ambassador. Paola, there's a question here for you, and let the ambassador chime in too if need to. How can we help the Venezuelan migrants here? What is the call of action?
Well, in fact, we had that discussion yesterday, and I think, they create a data bank with professionals. I'm presented to the city, and I'm pretty sure that will, open the door for many to start a work, a family, here in San Antonio. But I think that creating the data bank, it will be amazing, and I think I will promote that idea. And also the language. I know that is another barrier that we have, and that to figure out how can, with the government, help us to create free classes for the community, so it will be easier for them to get that position or job that they're looking for.
Thank you, Paola, and I have some thought myself on that, because churches help a lot too, and we need to put a database of those resources that might be available to the community. Ambassador, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think we need to talk about, and that is the Rio Group. And the Rio Group is a group of democratic countries in Latin America that have been very actively opposing the Maduro regime, and the leadership from Canada has been extraordinary. I mean, really, the leadership from Canada has been extraordinary. And for lots of countries, Canadian leadership is easier for them to swallow than American leadership, right? I mean, the Canadians have played a great role in Latin America, and I think we all need to recognize that. Jim Cragen asks, what about a Contadora group? The difference with Contadora was it was the superpowers, Mexico and Colombia, were in the Contadora group, telling the Central American countries what to do and helping guide them out of the crisis they were in. Venezuela certainly doesn't consider itself to be under the tutelage of any other South American country. So it's not a particularly, it's attractive, but I don't think that analogy works. There might be some way to do that. Look, we all need to work together, but at the end of the day, I am convinced that, what happens in Argentina is up to Argentines. And what happens in Peru is going to be determined by Peruvians. And what happens in the United States is going to be decided by the United States, not by the people who own questions here saying, why aren't you invading? Why aren't you doing more? It's the American public that's going to decide what we're going to do. And it's the Venezuelans who are going to solve the problem of Venezuela. It may not be over the short term. It may be over a terribly long term. But it's Venezuelans who are going to determine the future of Venezuela, not outsiders.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we have a comment from a viewer that said that Woodland Baptist Church has free ESL classes. And I want to close by, also making a call of action that anybody that is listening right now that knows of resources that can be offered to these migrants, please send them to either Armin at the World Affairs Council, to myself, or to Paola at the Association, Venezuelan Association. And with that, Armin, floor is yours.
Thank you, Eduardo Parra. I think we could have gone another hour or so with all the questions. Thank you for all the questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions. What we can do is we will share out our guests' emails and, of course, the association's Facebook page, which has been shared. If you have any of that, if you want those questions answered, we will share our guests' emails for you all to do that. Thank you for your time. Ambassador Shapiro, appreciate you for taking time from your World Affairs Council duties in Atlanta to be with us. And thank you, Paula, for sharing the experiences of local Venezuelans and their plight and their needs in San Antonio. And Eduardo, appreciate you for taking on this opportunity to be the moderator and to be a really good one at that. I appreciate that. We can't do this without you all, folks. So please learn how to become a member, make a gift, or just find out what the next programs are by subscribing to our email. The next program is May 27th, which is next week. It's a book club. The book is called Homelands by Alfredo Corchado, and it is moderated by another of my favorite people, Inigo Arzak, who will moderate the discussion. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our guests, and you all have a wonderful day.